Welcome to
The Business of Benefits is your no BS, no sales guide to real solutions.
No gimmicks, just the truth about how to take control, transform your benefits, and care for your most valuable asset, your people.
If you're tired of the same old sales pitch and you're ready to rethink your benefits, this podcast is for you. The truth is out there. Are you ready to hear it? This is Chelsea Ryckis. Welcome to the Business of Benefits. Today, we are talking all things third-party administrator. TPA is the acronym. I know we throw a lot of acronyms around in this business. There's another one. And it's actually, in my opinion, the most important part of your health plan. So you're going to hear in this episode from Eugene Starks. Eugene, you're going to hear in the episode, it's not his first rodeo. He's been doing this a long time, and he comes with a ton of wisdom. I'd also like to point out that he is an avid CrossFitter and 10 times as fit as I am, which embarrasses me, but nonetheless, super cool guy. Check him out on LinkedIn. Listen to the episode. You're going to hear all sorts of things about TPAs, from what is the primary function, what else are they doing, how do they interact with other vendors, how do they manage all the pieces of a plan, where might you find hidden fees in their contracts? What's an acceptable fee range for a TPA? Oh man, we got into so much. And then he's going to leave us with his biggest piece of advice for employers. So employers, this is such a good episode because whether you're fully insured, level funded, on the road to self-funded, the TPA is the quarterback of your plan. So listen, like, share, subscribe, follow Eugene, and let me know what you think about this episode. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Business of Benefits. I am your host, Chelsea Ryckis, and I am so excited about our guest today. We have Mr. Eugene Starks. Eugene, how are you?
I'm doing great. And, I've been around this business a long time, so everybody calls me Mr., but always tell everybody, I'm Eugene.
He's like, just please don't. Understood. So thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to have you because you are an expert in all things third-party administrators. So why don't, before we dive into what the heck a third-party administrator is in a health plan, why don't you just give us a bit of a background on who you are and what you've been doing in this business?
Oh, golly. Well, how long do we have for this recording?
You're right.
I'll keep it short. But, I'm blessed. I mean, I was working for a hospital back in the mid-90s, and I was doing their HMO contracting, which some people don't even know what that is. And I got hired by the HMO in New Orleans, and so I guess I was doing something right, but I got hired by an HMO in New Orleans, and that's really where I went from being on the provider side to being on the benefits side. And it was the best education I ever had. The company was Advantage Health Plan. My CEO was a lady named Jane Cooper. Now, she was tough as a Marine sergeant, but I learned so much through her, and really because of her and because of that opportunity, I really came to understand the inner workings of claims payment, plan build, stop loss, all of those things that surround the operation of a self-funded plan. And so, I went from doing that. I came up to Jackson, Mississippi, where I live in this area now, in 99 to help a PPO that wanted to start an HMO. And after I was there about 6 months, the board made the wise decision not to start an HMO. But I said that left me in the awkward position of being overpaid and underworked. So I've been around a while. I knew what that meant eventually. So a few months later, they said, hey, we kind of don't need you anymore. So I did a couple of consulting gigs, but then I opened my own consulting company because I just thought, I'm tired of other people telling me when I can work and when I can't work. So it started way back there with the experience I gained in New Orleans working for the HMO. And I built that. That was 2000 when I opened my own consulting company, 2025, So I've been doing self-funding and actually became partner in a TPA in 2007. And so I've just been immersed in it for a long time, and it's a great area, challenging area, and great opportunities like we've never seen before.
I couldn't agree more. This is definitely such a unique time to be in this business, and I'm sure your perspective, having seen it evolve and kind of coming to this moment of transparency and this demand for better that we're seeing with regards not only employers and consultants, but legislation and the country as a whole, right? Yeah, it's a very exciting time to be, especially on your side, because the TPA, for everybody listening, the third-party administrator, is one of 4 main functions in a health plan. So every single health plan has the same 4 pieces at the very least. These are the fundamental kind of core principles of a health plan. This is the same if you're buying a product off the shelf from Blue Cross, Cigna, United, or if you're designing your own custom healthcare plan. So the same 4 pieces. Really quick, what those are. We've got the TPA, which we're going to dive in really deep today into all that they're supposed to do, how they get paid, what can go wrong, what can go right. Eugene is our TPA expert because he, like he said, he's a partner in a TPA. So the TPA is one piece. The second piece is a PBM, a pharmacy benefit manager, which we actually will have Rachel Strauss, the PBM princess, on in a later episode, diving into all things PBM. Next, we have stop loss. That's the actual insurance that's protecting you from catastrophic claims. And then you have a network, and some plans have networks, some don't. But the really interesting thing about all of those pieces is that the TPA has to interact with every single one of them. So what is, Eugene, in your opinion, the main function of the third-party administrator in a group health plan?
Well, I mean, really the core function, the fundamental thing we need to do. And if we don't do this, everybody will know it immediately and everybody will be upset. And that's basically to process a claim. So that means a claim comes in the door. These days it's electronic. I could tell you stories about when we would get reams and reams of mail, paper invoices or whatever, claims from hospitals and stuff. But the main thing we do is we pay a claim. And, there's a lot of logic that goes into building how a claim is paid and all those connections. But at the core function, if we're not paying the claim timely and accurately, everybody's upset. The provider, the member, the consultant, the client, So at the core, that's really what we do. We have to pay the claims.
So something that I want to add into this for additional context is a lot of people don't understand that a claim is a request for dollars, right? So a claim, it's different than a condition. So a claim is for a certain amount of dollars that a health plan is paying for a covered service under some type of contract, usually. That is a claim. A condition is different, right? Like you can have cancer, you can have kidney disease, you can have a high cost drug, but what you're paying for that condition, the claim, varies greatly based on your health plan. So for example, a knee surgery under a fully insured BUCA plan might be $30,000, but under your custom healthcare plan, it may be $6,000. So I think it's important for the employers listening to understand that in this country, there is not a price per condition, a price per procedure. It's a price per payer, which makes a TPA's job really interesting because it's not just like they're looking at one charge master that's like, oh, okay, well, every knee surgery that comes through is going to be $36,000. Every single plan is different. So to his point, is the most fundamental part of a health plan is getting claims paid, getting them paid timely, and getting them paid according to the plan documents, right?
Right. Yeah.
What else does a TPA handle?
Well, TPA handles eligibility. All right. So, yeah, TPA handles everything that has to do with the plan. It's really kind of the hub in the wheel, so there's a lot of spokes, the PBM and the network of some iteration, the stop loss, and on their, in the plans that we administer, more complex. There's a lot of point solutions we're connecting with, but at the core, the TPA's data has to be the source of truth. So when, however we receive the eligibility file, once we have it, the eligibility comes to us, and then we disperse the eligibility to our partners, to the PBM, to the network if needed, the reference-based pricing, repricer, whomever. So I'd say that the next main function, and I said we have to pay those claims timely and accurately, but if we don't have accurate member data, member-only coverage, is family covered, dates of birth. I mean, anything could be off. And if it's off, it's going to be inaccurate. Most likely, if there's a discrepancy, it's going to append. We've got an employer has Joe's date of birth is 1974, and we have it as 1976 or something like that. Something disconnected somewhere. So the other really core function we do is managing that eligibility.
So, and I guess I'm assuming that most of the groups that you work with are working on file feeds and everything's electronic for the most part, right?
Right.
Yeah. But there's still human error in entering those socials and dates of birth nonetheless, right? Less than there probably used to be. But so some say, and I used to believe this when I first started doing self-funding, that TPAs were the quarterback. And whenever anything would go wrong, I would get pissed off at the TPA, full transparency. I've since learned that that's not really fair a lot of the time. Sometimes it is, I will tell you. However, I argue that it might be the consultant's job to quarterback a plan. And I'm curious, this is kind of a hot topic. What do you think? Is it your job? Is it my job?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would really say it's our job. But, it does speak to the change and complexities of the plans. And so, 20 years ago, I would say, honestly, the plan designs were pretty fundamental. And particularly, we weren't using outside, integrating point solutions for different, imaging, knee surgery. With any group now, it's not just go see a doctor and have the procedure done, or go to a facility and have the procedure done. We prescribe point solutions that, particular solutions that when the member follows those, it maximizes their benefits. It's designed to maximize their outcomes, right? We're selecting quality providers. I would say 20 years ago, I would say consultants weren't nearly as educated. Some were really smart on stop loss. Some understood ERISA law and plan design. But I would say, 20 years ago, that was probably a more fair comment to say that the TPA was the quarterback. But and maybe it is, and maybe the analogy is that we're the quarterback, but you're the coach, and you're calling the plan design, you're calling the plays. So what I find is that the collaboration with the consultant is more paramount now than ever. I mean, on a basic plan, honestly, you load everything, process everything, send a check register every now and then to the client. You would talk to the consultant a couple times a year, certainly if somebody had a member issue or something like that. But outside of that, monitoring the plan was pretty easy. Today, I don't go probably a week on our more complex plans without having conversations with the client and the consultant. So it's much more of a shared responsibility. 20 years ago, you probably could have just blamed me. Now, I might be blaming you because we do have some consultants we work with that you can layer in too many solutions and then they start to conflict with each other. And then I get in trouble because in somebody's mind it was going to pay this way. In my mind, I'm sorting out, I'm applying logic and saying, well, these two conflict, I'm going to go with the main solution.
Of course. That's actually a very interesting point, because I feel like there's this continuum of where employers and consultants fall. So, you still have, and I talked to a company yesterday, they've been fully insured with the same broker, same carrier for over 20 years. They've never changed their plan. They've never marketed their plan. They, very, very old school. All the way to, I recently talked to a smaller self-funded client that had so many point solutions that employees didn't know what the heck was going on. And it's, you'll meet consultants, you'll meet employers along this continuum. But the most important thing is, you can have all the innovation and point solutions in the world, but if it's not being properly administered, or more importantly, well received by employees, what's the point, right? How much of the communication of, let's say there's a direct contract for imaging, I know my answer to this, which is I handle everything, but I'm curious in general, how much of the communication around these special programs do you think falls on the TPA?
Well, I think that's good. I think it's driven by what is the communication plan. So a company like yours that I'm familiar with, you as the consultant really own a lot of the communication. On some of our clients, we'll use maybe the pre-cert medical management company like an ICM, where they're doing the kind of the care navigation and even started serving as the concierge role and the main point of contact for a member question. And then they help navigate the member to whether it's a surgical center or something like that. Sometimes on our smaller groups, we just do that internally. So we have an internal concierge team. So it varies widely by the consultant and by the client.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe a takeaway for employers listening is, you know, really understanding, not just assuming that either the consultant or the TPA or the people that you hire are doing all the things that you think that they're doing. Like, very much a big part of fiduciary responsibility as a plan sponsor, it's not only proper selection of vendors, but it's the monitoring and the management of that vendor performance, right? And it's like, so, well, let's talk first about vendor selection, right? And then I'd love to get your opinions on different ways that employers could maybe monitor whether a TPA is meeting their expectations and successful. But let's start at procurement, right? What are some questions that employers should be asking, or consultants, if they're the ones doing this RFP for employers, should be asking of TPAs?
Do you pay your claims on time?
Yeah. Right. So, and what's an acceptable answer in your opinion to that, or like a time frame?
Yeah. Well, what I would do is just give you a report that shows volume of claims processed, number of days, and I would say, we over the years we did everything manually, and I think we had like a 5-day turnaround on a clean claim. And then, moved to doing a lot of it automated electronically, a lot of auto adjudication. And we got that up, we could kind of set that throttle at 70%, 80% on auto adjudication, depending on the kickers we had, what CPT codes or, wherever, we'll pause them to review manually. Now with all of the, complex point solutions, our auto adjudication rate has gone back down because we're really taking a closer look and navigating people. Right.
And you have to, and just for employers, if there's these point solutions that Eugene's talking about, what that might look like is a direct imaging contract, where if employees need an MRI and they go through a certain vendor that's built onto the plan, they get that imaging at no cost. They could be direct contracts for cancer treatment, surgery centers of excellence. There's reference-based pricing, where with facilities, usually you don't see that on like PCP or specialist visits, but you see it more on facility claims. And you might also just have direct contracts with facilities. And the TPA has to manage all of that. They have to be able to, like, this claim comes in and let me go through the 5 to 10 programs that this company might have in place to figure out how much I pay. It's a big job. So how do you keep everybody organized, knowing that custom health plans are all very different, right? It's not like you can just tell your employees, here's our playbook.
Right. Yeah. When you see one self-funded plan, you see one self-funded plan. And so, with us, we have teams that work with each client. So, depending on the size of the client, we might have a team that's working exclusively or almost exclusively with a large client. Most of the time, we have some clients in the, 1,500, 2,000 range, but, we reflect our TPA, client size reflects really the population we serve. And that is, most of this country is built on small business, right? So small business might be 50, might be 30, might be 300. So we always have a lead claims processor for every client. And then we have others that assist based on volume. So it's specific education. And, when they go to work, if they're toggling between a couple of clients, they're continually reviewing, what's the plan design say? What is the point solution? Yeah, the SPD. What's that say? What's the point solution? And we build a lot of that logic in, right? So it's built into the plan so that everything's not a manual decision. One of the most important things we do is the build out on the front end. Because if we don't, you're asking what are those core functions? I mean, we build the plans. I mean, we get the SPD and that's an area where it's like consultant sign off, client sign off. Okay, this is the SPD. This is the SPD we're building. Yes, this is the SPD we're building. Okay, and so it's a lot of checks and balances just on the front end. And still with that, to take an example of say, imaging, if we're routing them to green imaging, are they a paying sponsor for this?
They are not, but I will reach out to them. I'm just kidding.
We'll get, we actually get a list invoice from them on the images. So it doesn't even come in as a UB or a HICFA. We have to track it and report it to stop loss, so there's certain services that don't even come in on traditional billing format because it's sort of it's an invoice, disease management. It's an invoice.
Right. So back to the procurement, asking how quickly do you pay claims? Like what's the volume of claims that you're processing? At what level are things being auto adjudicated? Usually the way that we like to do things is like a claim dollar amount, like anything over a certain threshold, we want it flagged. Another good question that I think is always relevant in the procurement process is how are you paid, right? What are some ways that your compensation aligns with the success of the employer, or maybe some ways that it doesn't? I'd love to hear from you, and you don't have to focus on Acuity. You could just focus on, the industry in general. What are typical TPA fees? And then also, what are some things that employers should look out for that may be hidden in those contracts?
Well, I think the main thing you would want to look at, I would say, is, what are the fees? How do they bill them each month? Like sample billing, because there are some things like, for instance, on PBM, because we have a per member per month fee for administering, but on a PBM we have $1 per script. Now that helps pay for the interface and the file feeds and everything between the PBM and interaction with PBMs now is much more intense than it used to be. Just the fact, when you had to track everything to accumulator, change everything because that used to almost exist out there as sort of a separate benefit plan almost, but now everything has to accumulate to the same stop loss, right? To the same accumulator on the plan. So it's really how transparent are they with their fees? Because there may be some interactions where it costs me to access or costs me to set up the file feed, that kind of stuff. So the key is really transparency in how the TPA, I wouldn't call them out. In fact, honestly, I think a lot of them are out of business now, but, I was familiar with TPAs that, I would see their fee and I'm like, okay, there's no way they're administering this plan for that fee.
100%. And that's actually a conversation that I've been having a lot recently with CFOs. So pushing back on certain fixed costs, like an administrative fee, for example, like broker compensation. Okay, their current consultant on a fully insured plan is making $27 per employee per month. We're going to be going to a custom unbundled self-funded program where you're saving, $500,000 to $600,000 guaranteed. Plan performs the worst possible. That's the minimum savings. Our fee is going to be $35. Let's just say that's what it was, $35 per employee per month. And the CFO is fixated on, that $27 to $35 difference when it's really the variable cost. And it's like, I think a lot of times people don't, if you're fixed on these admin fees, you're going to get what you pay for.
Yes, 100%. And honestly, we're working through that with an outside consultant now that's, wanting us to drop our fee on a group. And I might, because I want to work with this client, this consultant. But our cost is 2.3% of their plan cost. So you want me to reduce my fee by 15%, so you've impacted what? 0.02% of the plan cost.
Yeah,
Why don't
that's
we,
short-sighted.
why don't we work together to figure out where are the opportunities to save dollars?
There is nothing wrong with companies have to make money. Consultants have to make money. PBMs need to make money. TPAs need to make money. It's about, is it aligned and is it fair for the services that are being rendered? And I think that TPAs, in my experience, it's been the most challenging piece of managing a health plan, because what tends to happen, and this is obviously not speaking about your TPA, otherwise I wouldn't have you on the show, and you've been around long enough that you've stood the test of time. However, a lot of TPAs out there, and here's another good question for procurement, is like, how long have you been in business? What conflicts of interest do you have with vendors that you're working with? Who actually owns you? Do you have cybersecurity insurance? What active litigation do you have? Are you outsourcing during the busy times of years your claims processing to a third-party company that's not going to meet the deadlines that you've told me you will? Those are more questions. But things that I've seen happen to my own book of business when we first started, before we really knew how to vet appropriately, was things like the TPA grows really fast. Everybody starts talking about this awesome TPA. Everybody's funneling their business to them. They don't have the scalability in their operations. And then they outsource another claims processing company who then isn't meeting the standards. There's no quality control. And then, 2 years later, we've got $100,000 worth of claims hitting our register. And we're like, well, where did this come from? Oh, we hired this firm. Those are the worst TPA experiences that I've had. So we know how to appropriately vet for that. And we write into our contracts, like, if you're going to be doing that, then any liability that comes up is on you. It's not on us. What other things have you seen, not Acuity do, but just in general, is like big fails on the TPA side?
Well, I think you touched on some of them. I mean, a TPA, I mean, we've been doing this a long time. We've had seasons of great growth. We've had seasons where it's like, okay, no partners get paid, but everybody else gets paid, right? I mean, business, it's like a lung. It's going to expand and it's going to contract, right? So, we've never outsourced anything. I mean, we have some outsourced vendors, like where, what's the right word? We have all of our claims go electronically to, they're received somewhere, that shipping. So they aggregate all our claims, so that kind of stuff. But we're not outsourcing the core functions. We're not outsourcing the payment of claims, those kind of things. The questions about litigation, I will just say one thing that's changed immensely, is we went, I bet 20 years and never had an E&O claim, never had a legal, in the last 5 years, we probably had 3 cases that we had to get an attorney to help us with,
It's become very litigious.
It's become very litigious over things that, before wouldn't have happened, or we're trying to do more complex claims. And look, I think one of the most important things for a consultant and a TPA is to vet the prospective client. Because one of my favorite, another potential sponsor for you, TrueScript. But one of the things one of the mantras we've R&D'd from TrueScripts is work with people you know, like, and trust. People you know, like, and trust. And life is too short. The business is too challenging to do anything less than that. But I say that because, a couple of years ago, we were really wooed in on a pretty large case, about 800 employees, and every TPA loves to get an 800-man case. But we didn't have you might want to see the financials of the TPA. We didn't see the financials of the employer, so they're less than a year in, they're 8 months, 10 months in, they file for bankruptcy. They're in, now I'm in it. Now I've got to get my attorneys, to get my money.
Now you're in it. Yeah. Well, and that's definitely like is the self-funded, like a feasibility self-funded study, right? Like, is this a good fit? Do you really, because it also, think about it, there's run out claims, right? It doesn't end when the plan ends. Like, there's a lot more to it, and stop loss has to be designed appropriately. So let's talk a little bit more about ways that TPAs are paid. So obviously, I think one of the big takeaways is don't be afraid of a higher admin fee on a TPA if they do a good job, especially if the turnaround time with claims is good, if they're not outsourcing things to unreliable parties, especially if they're handling like data analytics and a lot of these integrations, they need to make money. And trust me, I've made the mistake early in my career of going with the lowest admin fee, and every single time it resulted in us moving. So just don't do it. But what about...
Now, I was going to say in that vetting process, you want to ask about how do you manage eligibility? How do you feed eligibility? Do you feed eligibility? So like I said, for us, we're the source of truth. We inherited some cases where, it was going from Navigator out to each vendor partner, but then, there was the opportunity that we were not all working. The sheet music was not the same. So, one of the, we gained a lot of credibility. One of our clients took on a whole new HR team, and which is always exciting right in the middle of a plan year. It's like, now they're getting to know their TPA that, they weren't responsible for selecting. But one of the things that really helped them was them knowing we were the source of truth and that we were pulling the feeds and we were sending them out to the client. So I think that's important. I mean, the accuracy of the eligibility data across all the vendor partners is an imperative. So you want to look at your TPA and see how they manage that.
Do you feel like there are a lot of hidden fees in TPA contracts that employers are unaware of?
I don't think so as much today. 10 years ago. So for us, we've been doing this a long time. If we get a consultant that really doesn't know as much about stop loss and all that, we may do the stop loss shopping. I mean, we've got access to 30 markets. Now, in reality, there's probably about 8 we haven't played at any given time. So, it wasn't unusual in the past for the TPA to have a commission on the stop loss if they placed it. Again, that's fine. There needs to be a commensurate. I mean, we know where we need to be dollar-wise to administer a case of a certain size, and we're not going to give it away because I can't lose money, right? I may have tighter margins on some groups than others, but overall, I got to make money. So we'll talk to the consultant about, this size group, this size group with these complexities, these are where we need to be. This is where we need to be. We don't do that, meaning, the commission on stop loss so much anymore. We just transferred everything to just the fee, because it just makes it so much easier.
Well, I've seen things like clawback fees.
Never.
Right. Will you tell everybody what that is?
Yeah. So, I mean, clawbacks, rebates, if you're, clawback, you might want to talk about claw. I've never done it. I've heard of it. So, but
so basically you overpay and then the TPA is going to overpay and then they realize their mistake and they go back and they, recoup whatever it is that they overpaid. And then they charge a fee for clawing that money back for the recovery.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like, who made the mistake in the first place? Why
Right.
are we rewarding you for finding your mistake? But there's a lot of things like that.
Yeah. Well, look, we're not perfect. We've overpaid a claim and I've been on the phone with the provider and I've had to, negotiate getting the fees back or withholding a future payment on that client, but we never charge for that. We generally apologize for that when that happens.
Yeah, and it happens. So it makes sense. But yeah, those are built into contracts. I've seen it recently.
Yeah. Golly, that blows my mind, actually. That never even occurred to us. I would say, TPAs used to keep a lot of rebates. And, we've always passed through 100% of the rebates received. Now, what's 100% of rebates? Meaning, that's a whole different discussion about what PBMs are sending back, but so, ours has always been, every fee is a transparent fee, and meaning, even if it's a dollar on the PBM, we report that in the fee disclosure. So before they contract with us, they know what the fees are. And of course, there's a 5,500 at the end of the year that also reports that this is what they all total to. So I think, I guess I'm not that creative. I hadn't thought of other ways to hide fees. Ours have been pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that about you. And reading some of these contracts, it's super interesting to see some of the percentage of savings arrangements for mistakes that were made. And it's not always just on medical claims, but nonetheless, let's talk about, you obviously have an insider look into the performance of hundreds, if not thousands of plans across the country. What are you seeing as the top cost containment solutions that are driving results?
And, at the core, it's navigating the member to the right place of care at the right time. And we see it in terms of certainly the claims cost, but then the quality and the outcomes. So I think that's, cumulatively the biggest cost saver and the biggest measure of member satisfaction. Members, they're not that excited, or not that they're pretty much indifferent to what the plan is saving. They're very keenly attuned to what they're paying or what they're not paying. So I would say the next, to that would be whether it's direct contracts or reference-based pricing model, huge cost driver, and I think you have to start there.
I like that. I am a big fan as well of reference-based pricing. And when you were talking about the right care at the right time, are you referring to like a quality medical management solution?
Yeah. Yeah. So where we're seeing, I think, again, the best member satisfaction and the best, savings to the member, and then we know that translates to savings for the plan, is when we can navigate them to the right provider for something as simple as imaging, durable medical equipment, or a procedure. Excuse me, or a procedure. So, working with, and there's some highly skilled, very capable medical management care navigation companies out there. That really makes a huge difference. When we're looking for an opportunity with a consultant, a new consultant, or a new client, we want to know who are their go-tos on PBM and medical management and that kind of thing. And we can build a connection and build a relationship with anybody, but we also know who's out there and doing a good job. And so we always have an opinion.
Right.
Ultimately, we defer to the consultant or the client, but we always have an opinion.
Well, the great thing is whether it's medical management or reference-based pricing or these direct contracts that you're talking about, all of them are essentially reliant on members knowing that they have support and that they have these extra programs, which comes back to one of our original points of communication, right? Like, who is in charge of communicating to the member that, and like, how do we interact with them and engage them prior to them deciding to go to the hospital for an MRI? How do we build that trust so that they're texting us and letting us know that they need an MRI and allowing us or the medical management team the opportunity to guide them through the healthcare delivery in the most affordable, quality way? So I find it interesting that so many employers and consultants are focused on finances. And it's like, again, the tactics, the strategic communication plan that's needed to actually make this work, right? At the best member level experience possible. That's a huge piece that I feel like you understand, I understand, but I don't know that a lot of people really give it the merit that it deserves.
Right. I agree with you. And I would say, if you're coming off a fully insured plan and you have, the networks I find that save the most that can compete with RBP without the complexity and without the fees associated are generally local high performance networks, right? Outside, so you make a move from fully insured to self-funded, you may be engaged that strategy. That works very well in Louisiana. There's a great network, and the discounts are great, and the access is very high quality. It's not, you can see everybody. But the next move after that is some form of combination of reference-based pricing and direct contracting. When you implement those two pieces, it takes a lot of employee education to understand how to navigate, particularly that reference-based pricing piece. But when you implement those, you're going to move the client towards savings at a volume they don't even anticipate, they can't anticipate, right?
Yes.
So,
yes, 30 to 50%.
Right. So once you do that, in my opinion, that's a fundamental building block. Now the savings are there. Now everything else we're doing is building member experience and helping the members to realize the savings that we're getting, because our plan designs for our clients, which you, the consultants, help us with, is there's always going to be, if you just want to go your own way, there's a song about that. You can go your own way. It's a little older.
I love that song.
Okay.
Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah. Exactly. See, now there's why we're connected. This is why we're
exactly. This is why we get along so well.
Exactly. But we also say, look, if you follow this guidance, if you start here with the care navigation, you're going to have a better experience, and B, you're going to realize less out-of-pocket cost to you.
And that's the win-win. And
Right.
that's when programs are designed really intentionally. You can have employees winning at the same time that employers are winning. And, the traditional mindset, a lot of the employers listening are probably used to hearing, if you want to lower cost, we have to negatively impact member experience. We have to tell them you can't go somewhere. We have to increase out-of-pocket expenses. We have to narrow a network. We got to take drugs off of our formulary. That's not the only way. There is actually a way where if you make data-driven decisions, you can get access to significantly higher quality care at significantly lower prices. And, it just challenges that paradigm that there's a correlation in healthcare between cost and quality. Higher cost does not mean higher quality. Hardly ever in healthcare. Great.
Never. Yeah.
And usually it's the opposite, because if you are getting some super specialized back surgery at a general hospital, it's going to cost them a lot more to do that than to go to an outpatient back surgery center that does that 10 times a day, all day, and the surgeons are super experienced. So that's how the cost quality equation actually works. But we are out of time. I want to ask you one more question, and that is, if you could give employers one piece of advice when it comes to either being on an unbundled self-funded plan or choosing a quality TPA, what would it be?
Look, I'm going to refer to, you need to pick the right consultant.
Good call.
I mean, it really is. And we're, a little bit on our history. All of us who are partners in this TPA, we all owned our own agency before we owned a TPA. So we still have a kind of a commercial side where we still have direct clients. I find I value when I can work with a brilliant consultant, because I think the employer wins, and I think the consultant and the TPA wins. And quite frankly, I think all of our vendor partners that we work with win. So this is complex. We really need more smart people with the same vision, with the same values and same goals. And so our clients where I think we're succeeding the most are where the partnership for the TPA starts with the right consultants.
I love that. It's having the right coach. And then picking the right quarterback, and then the rest of the players, for sure. Well, Eugene, where can our listeners find you if they want to get a hold of you?
Well, they can shoot me an email at estarks@acuity-group.com. They can go to our website, which is, whatever, leave the W's off, but
Whatever it is.
acuity.com. Yeah. Uh, and I'm sure you can put that in the show notes. I think I gave you my email address for the show notes. So that's a good place to start. And we would love to talk to you and love to meet, whether you're a client or a consultant. If you're a client, we want to know about the consultant you're working with. But we'd love to have this conversation with you.
Absolutely. And, I just realized we never really got to talk about how to properly assess the performance of certain vendors within health plans. So I'm going to have you back, and we're going to have a whole conversation about using a fiduciary framework to manage, monitor your vendor partners, assess KPIs, set KPIs, things like that. So
I
Eugene,
think that would be a great conversation.
It'd be fun. So thank you so much for being here. You are the best, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks again.